I've been looking at the book of Acts just recently, and as I do this little walk in the morning, just thinking about the introduction about Barnabas. Barnabas comes into Acts in Acts chapter 4, and he features quite a bit in the book of Acts. He obviously comes alongside Paul, and he helps introduce him to the believers in Antioch, and they also have a difficult disagreement. Barnabas is somebody who in Acts chapter 4 is named as the son of encouragement. He's a Levite from Cyprus, so he was someone from a Jewish background, but he was nicknamed son of encouragement because that was his kind of gift, really. That was his real area that he flourished in. And we've all got different areas in our lives that we perhaps tend towards, that we have a gift for, that we will perhaps excel in different ways. And God uses us in that particular way. Maybe there's a strong sense of a gift of healing in your life, that God really uses you in that area of healing. Maybe prophecy, maybe teaching, maybe you're a real passionate evangelist. There can be very different flavours to the Christian life, and our personality comes out through that often as well, and the things, the gifts and callings on our lives. Gosh, it's only a bit of a dark there. I'm walking through some woods here. Encouragement is something that I tend to feel comfortable with. I think I quite enjoy doing encouraging things. I like being encouraged. I kind of get a bit sensitive about discouragement, and one of the things I'm trying to learn at the moment is that people have very different gifts. They have very different callings to us. We're not all the same, and we tend to kind of easily gravitate to those who are similar to us. And also we find it harder, perhaps in a team, to deal with those people who are very different to us. And it's quite important to understand that God often puts people together in a group that have got different gifts and different callings on their life, and they're things which we all need to receive from, and perhaps be encouraged by the fact that the differences are going to contribute and add into a team, and going to make it a wider base, a more functional team actually in the end. And it's a real challenge when we look at Acts 15 and the disagreement between Paul and Barnabas. It's a painful one, really, and who was right, who was wrong? Were they just seeing different sides of the same coin about John Mark? So this guy who had been really, it appears, very flaky, had let them down. Paul was very focused on the task in hand. This guy had not measured up, he'd failed them. Barnabas wanted to give him an extra chance, was the sort of person who wanted to go over and above and give some extra rope to somebody who had made mistakes. And we see, this whole thing with Barnabas, that he was the one who'd brought Paul into Antioch. Now, people would have easily said, Paul's not somebody we want in our church, in our group. We don't trust him. We don't know whether there's real change in his life. I mean, his background was pretty horrific, especially in relation to Christians. Christians were persecuted by Paul. He was a very driven man, a very angry man, a very violent man, religious, but in all the wrong ways of being religious, zealous, but in a very destructive, negative, extremist, and a murderous way, really. So it took quite a lot of grace to realise that God had done something, and somehow Barnabas had grace for this guy who, I'm sure, we see that from Acts, and I'm sure the day that those guys met, Paul had a few rough edges, and we seem to sort of sometimes over-sanctify him, but we see the realities in Acts. This guy with very strong passion, very strong ideas, very fixed focus, and somebody who wanted to get stuff done. I don't know if you have found working with people like that difficult. Maybe you're like that and you get very frustrated by people who are kind of a little bit too laid back and non-committal or apparently half-hearted. Maybe people who don't get focused on the job in hand, or maybe you're a bit the opposite. Maybe I'm a bit like that with sort of Barnabas, where I just try and give people the extra rope. Then I get quite frustrated. I feel a bit let down or hurt if things don't work out well. The whole thing of I'd love to encourage people. Why don't they encourage me? Why don't they see my needs? Even if I don't vocalize them or express them, why don't they pick up on them? Why aren't they sensitive to how I'm feeling about all this? And my feelings become quite a dominant factor sometimes, not necessarily in a healthy way, but they can actually kind of stop me doing things because the feelings get overwhelming and they become the number one thing before I start getting on and doing stuff. So we can all have our weaknesses and strengths. And my prayer today is that God will give us wisdom as we work with others, as we perhaps focus on allowing God to deal with our blind spots, maybe being open to Him speaking through people who are very different, maybe excelling in the gifts that God's given us and the things that He's called us to do, but also recognizing that there's a great deal of value in working and functioning with people who are quite different to us and who operate in a different way and who see things from a very different perspective. So I pray for wisdom today, that God would guide us and lead us and help us in making those connections, but also recognizing the way that we all function differently, and recognizing too that the gifts that God has given us are there to bless others, but also to flow together and function together, especially in teams. So bless you. I pray that today will be a fruitful day as you try and work with others.